our land. Glorious and free. Got 2 songs going on. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
These are patriotic Canadians.
Oh my God!
You're now attacking different older people.
You guys are disgusting!
Look at the fucking news media. Look. Look. You coward! You sound
We have nowhere else to go.
My phone dropped.
Practicing
Back there.
I hope it wasn't.
Anybody with us? I see you shaking your head back there. You should be watching this. Take a lesson in courage.
Man, they declared this called the Crusade.
Cowards!
Nazi supporters.
Generation theory. Every generation. Law enforcement professionals, huh?
Oh, you got blown up in Afghanistan, eh? And these guys are going to arrest you and push you back when you serve for your country?
Right. You guys keep those mentions. Resign everybody else to serve them. Go for it.
I don't smoke. I'm dying. Children. You don't know my life. You don't know my struggle. I fought for my shit. I survived the worst. This is nothing.
Tell your boss to stop it, huh?
I've been
Follow
blown
the
up.
law.
Peace and love. And if
No
you think
respect
he
for
does,
human dignity
you're wrong.
whatsoever. We're not livestock to make rich boomers. All serial killers are boomers. I don't said that.
We love you all.
All they want is to be heard.
Take a second.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I need a minute.
You are not a serf.
I did surfing once.
We want to
oh
do
man, I
the
hurt myself there
SURF
too.
thing. No. You don't want to go SERF. That's
Oh,
what
no,
these guys
I-
want you to do. They want you to go SERF.
Oh,
Nuremberg 2, boys. Can't wait to see you there.
I don't want to be here.
You guys' grandchildren are going to be born
I'd much
into
rather be
debt,
home with my wife and kids.
owing a piece of their lives to the state. That's a wounded veteran!
Yes!
That's a wounded veteran!
Yes,
That's a wounded warrior right there! They got a key on his fucking head! That guy's Back up! Back up! Back up! Back up!
Hold on, stop pushing.
Back up! They kicked him in the leg. Back Back up.
Hold on, stop pushing.
They kicked him in the leg. The RCR guy. They booted him. That was weird. Here's the one. The one who booted him was this one. Kucher Lazon. He kicked the vet that had the wounded right leg. He kicked him right in the leg.
Oh, he's a greasy one.
This guy right here. Kucher Lazon. He kicked him.
Hey, what's up, guys? Saw you kicking that wounded veteran while he was down there earlier. You guys are a bunch of thugs, huh?
Didn't want freedom would stop everybody from having.
No, not at all. You want to keep the rich guys in power right now, huh? Soaking up all the wealth, buying up all those residential properties, turning the millennials into a bunch of permanent renters, reaching into the pockets of the unborn, deciding all future children to be born into serfdom. That's you guys. Abusing your citizens, huh?
I am the media now.
Just following orders, just like those guards at the ovens of Auschwitz. That's you,
Those connections are hitting up for all of our friends here.
right? You just do as you're told, right?
Moi, j'ai pas la même opinion.
These guys are getting in.
Hey, what's up, troops? This is Ops Sgt-Maj for Veterans for Freedom, Jeff Evely, back with you now on this 5th day of 2023, January, that is. Yeah, we got a lot of things lined up for the show today. We're going to be talking about the House Republicans and what's going on with those guys. I'm going to put a little bit of a generational lens over this. It's going to be a bit of a needle to thread, I think, but it's interesting to me to do that. It's a good little thought exercise to think of these kinds of conflicts in terms of the fourth turning. I'm always talking about the fourth turning, which is a crisis era. Ours started in 2008 with the global financial collapse and culminated in the 2020 declaration of the pandemic. And it was forecasted in Strauss-Howe generational theory, which was first posited back in about 1990, 91, based on all the best available Harvard data, history, so on and so forth. The other thing we have going on here is that Professor Jordan Peterson is still making news because the College of Physicians has ordered him to undergo re-education, essentially. He's got to do some training on how to use social media from his professionals. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And also what's coming up now in the usual Twitter trends, the more positive side of things that we've been covering on this show here lately, such as the mRNA trend, hashtag mRNA, hashtag died suddenly. While it's quite macabre, is the fact that it is trending finally, I think, is positive. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming out on that front as well on the Twitter front, I guess, the information battle space. So, and I just got a strike on my personal YouTube channel. I have been streaming to that as well. So that's the first time that I've gotten a strike over there. I must be getting some attention. I think they're kind of hunting me down at this point. So I'm going to try to cut those commie bastards off before I get into the most important segment of the adult conversation we're all trying to have. And they won't let us. So I'm going to see how that goes today. Cut them off near the end and just transition over to Rumble. I got to start plugging for this stuff. The whole time that I've been doing this, I never really talk about, promoting our own stuff. I don't think I've ever even said live that everybody should share this, but it does get shared quite a lot. We have a very motivated group of followers. As a matter of fact, I think followers is probably a pretty good description. They're not just viewers. It's kind of like a movement. People just kind of share the crap out of this stuff. But let's start promoting our YouTube channel, or sorry, not YouTube. Let's start atrophying our YouTube channels. I think YouTube needs to gracefully degrade. We're just going to kind of use that to promote our stuff and have the real adult conversation that everybody's looking for over on the adult platform there, which is Rumble. It was a Canadian company as it started off. I think it's down in Tampa now. But anyway, good company. So we're going to try and get our stuff out there, come hell or high water. Screw YouTube. Okay, so rant over. Let's dive right into this now. Here's our philosophical meme for the day. A nice quote from Spinoza. And I'm not really up on my Spinoza. I know he's a bit of a secularist, and Spinoza's God, I think, is more of a, he's a deist. He's something like a deist. He thinks of God as a kind of force of nature, you know, that doesn't necessarily make conscious decisions or anything like that. But anyway, he says, I do not know how to teach philosophy without becoming a disturber of established religion. So that's Baruch Spinoza. And yeah, that's what we're up against right now, is those of us who are trying to engage in philosophy, which is essentially just the pursuit of truth. We are unable to do so without upsetting the religion of postmodernism, aka wokeism. As we can see from the censors. Okay, I saw this one out there on Facebook, I think, there yesterday, and I got a kick out of it, so I shared it. So here we have a meme from the show, Shameless. Yeah, Shameless. This was the American version of Shameless. I think that actually started in the UK, but they did a great version of Shameless down in the States there. And here we have Debbie. She's kind of the awkward teenager, but she's, I think towards the end there, she's more of like a grown-ass single mom and stuff like that. But anyway, Debbie's here, and it says me on Debbie, and she's getting a hug from somebody whose face we can't see. And she's got this really awkward look on her face where she's kind of looking off to the side, like, why is this person hugging me? And it says on the person who is hugging her, when someone thanks me for my service. and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. I remember it was really awkward, especially in my early career, because people were always thanking me for kind of just putting on the uniform. And I was like, I haven't even gone anywhere yet, guys. Like, I haven't deployed. You know, I feel a little awkward just saying thank you, just not having really taken the plunge just yet, you know. So anyway, I got a kick out of this, and I know that a lot of people in the service kind of feel the same way. We never really know how to respond when people say these things. I found that thank you or you're welcome was just kind of awkward. That's not really what I'm going for here. Eventually what I settled on was it's my pleasure. And yeah, that seems to work well for me. So feel free to use that wherever you see fit. Okay, and here's another one. I got to zoom this out so you can see the whole thing. Okay, so this is one for the Gen Xers. This is a big part of what I'm always talking about with the fourth turning being the crisis era. It's not really a health crisis, as I think everybody is waking up to. It's a leadership crisis. And the reason for the leadership crisis is simple demography. Peak institutional power is something that's kind of handed off from one generation to the next. And the generation of peak institutional power right now is the boomers. And well, it's just like that expression that so succinctly kind of summarizes Strauss-Howe generational theory. Strong men bring good times make weak men bring hard times make strong men bring good times. And the cycle continues. And that's a pretty good description of the saculum that just continues to repeat the cycle of history. And right now we're at the point where the weak men who came up in good times, so the boomer generation born in the wake of the the Second World War, those are the good times that make weak men. It's the 22 or so years that immediately follow the last great crisis, because there's all this there's a big economic boom with institutions being built to new heights, and it really kind of seems like everything just happens for the generation that comes of age during that time. And when they reach peak institutional power, they effectively tyrannize us. A lot of it is due to ineptitude, and much more kind of due to corruption, the covering for the ineptitude. That's what I observed in the military, is that most of the corruption is to cover the ineptitude. So here we have a picture of a toddler, and he's taking a swig of a Coors, and it says Gen Xers at the top, 1965 to 1979. That's a pretty narrow band for Gen Xers, 14 years for a generation. It's probably a little bit broader than that. And it says the last great generation before all these sissies were born. Yeah, apparently that's not really the way you want to bring up kids either. Gen Xers were pretty well known for a lot of violence at school, especially in the United States, where they brought 186,000 guns to school every day. You know, Crips, Bloods, West Coast, East Coast, Mike Tyson, that sort of thing. Yeah, this is kind of the strong man who's come up in hard times. So the second generation born after the Great Crisis, being Gen X, they are the ones who come up in the hard times that make them strong men. And it's when the Gen Xers replace the boomers at peak institutional power that the crisis ends, because now you have the strong men coming back to peak institutional power who bring good times. And I know that this is utterly solipsistic of me. It does kind of feed my hubris when I talk about it in these terms. But anyway, I didn't write the theory, so take it up with Neil Howe and Bill Strauss. And Patricia's weighing in here, and she says, yeah, up to like 81 or 82, I always thought were Gen X. Yeah, that's right. So the millennial generation is the class of 2000. So if you were born in 82, then you're a millennial. So really, it goes up to 81 at least. Pew puts it all the way out to 85. So Pew puts it at 1965 to 1985. Strauss-Howe generational theory puts it at 1961 to 1981. I find there are some problems once I go all the way back to 61. Like, it gets kind of murky. So there's some gray areas at the boundaries, right? And also people talk about that micro generation of the Xennials of about like somewhere between 75 and 85 or something like that, where we all kind of we were coming on the scene alongside the technology and adapting to it like the whole way. So I had a Nintendo when I was a kid, and before that I had a Commodore VIC-20 when I was a little kid, and we just kind of like, you know, it changed and we adapted to it as it came on the scene. We were the first adult generation going around with camera phones in our pocket, that kind of thing. So anyway, it's an interesting subject to discuss, but that's how you define it, I find, can get a little bit like there's room to debate at the boundaries in particular, but yeah, broadly speaking, it's in that range. It's about 65 to 85, and you can kind of fine tune it in from there. Like 82 is a millennial, you know, in the strict clinical sense, but in the kind of cultural sense, you find that all the way out to 85. There's a culture there's a lot more cultural overlap, I find, with the first wave millennials. They have more overlap with the last wave Gen Xers than they do with the second wave millennials. Okay, so I just wanted to start things off here because I know that this is kind of close to home. This is Western Standard. They're reporting exclusive infighting between organizers puts Freedom Convoy reunion in jeopardy. So this is 18 hours ago, about yesterday-ish. Yeah, so they're reporting on this stuff. We've got some pictures here. It says Canada Unity founder James Bowder, and he's right here on the left. And this is Dana Lee Melfi Center. That's Peaceman. You might know him from Ottawa. And Jason LaFasse, this guy here. And you know, I'm just going to give a quick kind of presentation of this because we've already talked about it before. I was never really a supporter of another convoy. I think the purpose of the convoy was to like in the Strauss-Howe generational theory, it says there will be a great coming together where people all realize that we've let our problems rot for too long, and there's this kind of growing urgency to surmount the crisis and all of these problems. I think that was Freedom Convoy 2022. That was kind of this the great coming together that's supposed to take place before we all start turning that pendulum back in the other direction, right? So once that's been accomplished, I'm always kind of questioning, well, where are we going to go with another protest? And a lot of the attitude seems to be that we're just going to go, we're going to park, and we're going to stay until we get everything we want. I mean, we saw what happened with that the last time. I just don't want to see people putting themselves at risk of another, attempted false flag, probably much more successful this time, end up being interned. I think that there are much more productive ways for freedom-loving patriots to be investing their time at this stage of the game. I think at this stage of the game, we should be engaged in, it's not as much as about these like single major revolutionary events as it is kind of the smaller battles, whether it be submitting your human rights complaints, engaging with the courts, filing your access to information stuff, and getting other people to do the same thing. Let's just overwhelm them and make sure it's got some teeth this time, like legal teeth, not You know, if we just kind of go out there and wait for them to come in and beat us up again, then we're probably no further ahead, you know. So anyway, those are my thoughts, not to disparage anybody's efforts. I know that these, you know, everybody for the most part is very well intentioned and trying really hard. So anyway, it's just my take on things here. So in the midst of the confusion over the 2023 convoy reunion will proceed in February, former member of Canada Union has taken down its website and accused its founder, James Bowder, of having, quote, a bad ego. Quote, right now there's a consensus among a lot of people that James is a problem because he wants to make it all about Canada Unity and none of the organizers want it to be that, close quote. Canada Unity's former IT technician, Jason LaFace, told the Western Standard. So that's the guy on the right here. He's the IT technician. He's talking about James Bowder on the left. And, you know, this is kind of like infighting and airing dirty laundry. I don't really recommend that anybody go out and do that. It's too bad, and I'm not taking a position on what happened here one way or the other. Quote, but the minute everybody said the Canada Unity wouldn't be at the forefront, James took a little shit fit. It's always about James and never about anybody else. Close quote. The feud between LaFace and Bowder is the latest sign of, quote, Freedom Convoy 2.0, close quote, is in trouble. Infighting among some of the protesters' top organizers led to heated disagreements ranging from the name of the event to what its goals are. Yeah, that's kind of important. These are things that probably should be decided before you get to the meat and potatoes of the organizing, like the goal. What are the goals? You know, primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever. But you got to lay it out, because if you're going to organize people and you're going to lead them, they need to have focus and direction. That's what the leader is supposed to do. Okay. In early December, event organizers forced to change the event's location away from Ottawa, Ontario, after the city's police chief, Eric Stubbs, said there will not be a repeat of the Freedom Convoy, which occupied the downtown core for 3 weeks in early 2022. So the use of the word occupied is very suspicious there. Again, it's reminiscent of that occupation language that the establishment has been trying to throw at the Freedom Convoy as being somehow aggressive, but it's not. Okay. Then on New Year's Eve, Bowder announced that the, quote, World Unity Convoy was set to meet in Winnipeg, Manitoba from February 17th to 20 was canceled. Quote, I've had several security breaches and personal character attacks made against me and others on Team Canada Unity, close quote. Bowder, one of the organizers from the original Freedom Convoy, said in a Facebook post, quote, as a result of these security breaches that are beyond our control, I cannot in good conscience guarantee public safety as I promised, nor can I guarantee other Team Canada Unity Freedom Convoy national partners that could be deemed as convoy organizers protect them from being charged under Ontario's Bill 100 Act. So that's another thing I'm always pointing out about doing the big convoy protest again, is that the establishment has adapted. They've even passed new laws to make protests that they don't like illegal. Yeah, I mean, I think we should switch tactics, and we gotta fight them on another front, on a legal front, and take back our institutions before we can go back in there and scrap bills like this. Okay. However, several organizers contradicted Bowder's announcements shortly afterwards. Ron Clark, an organizer for the World Unity Convoy, told CBC News multiple groups and people would ensure the convoy would go ahead. Colin Big Bear also said Tuesday that the convoy to Winnipeg is, quote, still a go. According to several sources, a faction within the movement wanted to distance itself from Canada Unity on a host and host a, quote, World Unity Convoy, close quote, in Winnipeg on the same day. Bowder said this, quote, truly broke our hearts and our trust, close quote. LaFace, who was involved in Canada Unity for several years, said he is glad Bowder is stepping away from the February event. He called the former Freedom Convoy organizer, quote, very manic, quote, close quote, and aggressive and delusional. LaFace said his falling out with Bowder came after the organizers tasked Bowder with coming up with a mission statement that reflected a movement's goals. And that's an important thing too. That was something we got out there fairly early on, and there's been some tweaking, but and I think there's going to be more. But we had a mission statement really early on with V4F. Like I said, you need to kind of give it. You're dealing with a mob when you first start out. You got to give them some guiding principles. You got to give them that focus and direction. Like I said, so they should have had that off the bat. Sorry, guys, you should have. A week went, quote, a week went by and Bauer came back with a mission statement mentioning Canada unity. So right away we had a vote and it voted to get rid of it. Close quote. LaFace said, quote, after the meeting, James called me to start a bitching because I'm apparently throwing him under the bus by not voting for Canada unity. So I tried to explain to him that that's not what this is about, but he kept saying that this was the architect of the Freedom Convoy, close quote, that he was the architect of the Freedom Convoy, close quote. Okay, like, and a lot of this is kind of dirty laundry. I'm a little reluctant to continue going with this. So you know, I'm not sure what's going on with Western Standard here and why they want to air all this out. I guess it's news, but you know, I just kind of want to see people come together in the freedom movement, call out some bad actors where I see them. But this is kind of just drama, so I'm not going to go too far into it. Just a little bit here. Here's the author, Matthew Horwood, Bureau Chief for Parliament Hill. Matthew Horwood is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief of the Western Standard, based in the Parliamentary Bureau. So he lives in Ottawa. He has a degree in journalism from Carleton University, and he has been a reporter for the Hill Times and the Ottawa Business Journal. So he sounds like a homegrown Ottawa boy. I'm not sure if he's millennial or Gen X. It's hard to tell from the picture. But yeah, I mean, that's the perspective you're getting right here on the Freedom Convoy in the Western Standard, which is kind of, you know, supposedly right-leaning. But it's still like, it's only right-leaning from the Ottawa perspective. So I just wanted to put that in context for everybody. You know, it just seems like they're going to let these guys kind of badmouth each other publicly. And I don't think that's going to be a productive area for discussion, not at least on this podcast. So moving on. So let's see. Okay, what's Patricia saying? Because she's up on this stuff too. The media has been saying it's all off, but all the organizers say it's still on for sure. The fire is lit yearly, but they are trying to get more groups together and discuss ways to unify Canada better. Trudeau isn't doing it, that's for sure. Yeah, you know, Trudeau is not doing it. And it's like I said, we are in a leadership crisis. And so we have a lot of people kind of just, they know they got to do something. People don't want to sit by idly and let this continue to degrade. So I'm glad to see everybody stepping up, but it's going to be chaos for a little while, you know, until we get ourselves organized. And it's hard to do with independently minded people. So it's harder to do kind of on the right to herd the cats to become one unified group. But over on the other side, on the left, that's where, you know, all the smooth brains and the useful idiots are. And that's all you got to do is put it on the TV and they'll fall in line. So that's what we're up against, guys. You know, we're up against the mob. And we're a bunch of individuals that are that were just kind of working and minding our own business until we couldn't do that any longer. And now people who wouldn't otherwise be politically active and aren't necessarily conversant in best practices for organizing political events. I mean, they're doing the best they can, but we're going to have to expect a certain level of failure even still. So, and that's normal. Okay. That's no reason to get discouraged. So deeply divided Republicans still can't elect House Speaker after 6 ballots. So this is the way that the Globe and Mail is going to present it. They want to make it seem like the Republicans are, you know, buffoonish and whatnot. But there's a lot happening in the current historical moments. And so I just wanted to kind of give that fourth turning perspective on this. And also, like, the Globe and Fail is, you know, it's bailout media, so they're on the take as much as anybody is in Canada. You know, they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them, and the hand that feeds them is neoliberal, neo-Marxist, leftist, and so Republicans bad, Republicans scary, Republicans dumb. You know, because they're right-leaning. Yeah, that's kind of what's going on here. So it says House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy makes his way through a large crowd of news media and as he heads to the House chamber at the U.S. Capitol in Washington on January 4th. So they're electing a new Speaker of the House here, and this is because the Republicans took the House, and so now. You know, Jim Jordan, I talked about him yesterday. He's a candidate in this whole thing. And I think the thing that makes him such a good candidate is he doesn't really want the job. I think it really is kind of about civic duty with this guy. And he's been a very strong voice in the what is a kind of anti-authoritarian movement at this point. So he's one to watch anyway. Okay, so back to the article here. In the midst of the jostling and jockeying of the second failed day of attempts to elect a Republican speaker on the U.S. House, Florida Republican Kat Kamek stood before her conservative colleagues and issued a plea. Quote, "Today I am asking my friends and colleagues, are we the party of Reagan Republicans?" she asked. It was a plea for unity and an entreaty for conservatives to come together in selecting a speaker now that they have a slim majority in the chamber. But it was Republicans aligned with another conservative president, Donald Trump, who held the power, effectively grinding the operation of the House of Representatives to a halt by blocking the selection of a speaker for a second day. So, I mean, this is very clearly kind of the liberal perspective. They want the well-behaved Republicans to be the ones who select the Speaker of the House because they want a well-behaved Republican that they can kind of cudgel with the name-calling and the gaslighting into going along with their authoritarian agenda. And that's really what we have. We see that in Canada as well with the establishment right-leaning party, ostensibly right-leaning. They're not really. The Conservative Party, they're kind of a little more establishment, a little bit more better behaved, and they tend to kind of tap dance to the music. The Pied Piper is on the left, and they all kind of sway to the same symphony of destruction. It's just that they want to sway a little slower than the Liberals do. The Liberals want to get there yesterday, but the Conservatives seem to want all the same things that the Liberals do, just slower. And that's what they want, across the board. So that's what they're kind of ambling for here, I think, with the way that they're presenting the Donald Trump supporting Republicans as the bad guys, and they're obstructive and blocking. It's not that there's another perspective to be considered here. It's just that anything associated with Trump is necessarily bad and therefore counterproductive. Okay, back to the article. The impasse in the House, a moment fraught with so much anxiety that the U.S. Navy chaplain on Wednesday prayed for deliverance, quote, from intransigence and imprudence, close quote, is a new manifestation of the politics from the U.S. populist right and an early look at the upheaval it now stands ready to bring to Congress as Republicans assume a new position of power. By Wednesday evening, after 6 unsuccessful votes to choose a speaker, the House once again adjourned in this state of limbo. Most Republicans want Kevin McCarthy, the California representative who was previously in the House Minority Leader. But McCarthy's bid has been opposed by a group of 20 Republicans, most elected as anti-establishment Make America Great Again candidates, who are now determined to bring that form of populism to Congress by upending the way it does business. Is this upending the way it does business by competing for the position of Speaker of the House? And I haven't read this thing in full yet, but what they haven't mentioned at all is that McCarthy started out losing the first vote by about 4 votes. And by the time they got to the third, it was like 20. So it's going in the other direction as they continue to debate. And so they're presenting this from a leftist perspective, I would say. That is to say that non-establishment right-leaning folks are just troublemakers that are dismissed out of hand. They're not even talking about the real issues here. It's just, they're cheering for their team. Okay. So Mr. Trump himself has been unable to persuade them to relent. In a social media post on Wednesday, the former president urged, quote, all of our great Republican House members to vote for Kevin, close quote. Hours later, Lauren Boebert, a far-right Colorado Republican conspiracy theory adherent who has been among the former president's most loyal supporters, spurned that call from the House floor. Mr. Trump, she said, should instead tell Kevin McCarthy that, sir, you do not have the votes and it's time to withdraw, close quote. And I would agree. And I've been finding even Trump is kind of losing the plot with respect to Trumpism once in a while. And it's kind of been since he's been out of office, I think. But Lauren Boebert, I love this description right here. The far-right Colorado Republican conspiracy theory adherent, whatever. This is name calling, right? So this is not objective journalism at all. This is very clearly from the left-leaning perspective. Because everybody who's like genuinely on the right and not just a kind of establishment Republican that goes along with everything but slower, they're the source of all evil in the world, right? Okay. With his own power diminishing, Mr. Trump has, quote, set in motion forces he can't control anymore, close quote, said Morris Fiorna, a Stanford University political scientist. Quote, he can't put the genie back in the lamp, close quote. I find that to be diminishing of kind of the everyday electorates. I'm pretty sure that people have minds of their own, and they're trying to paint any supporter of his as being somehow like a useful idiot. It's projection. It's projection is what it is. The 9-seat House majority where the Republicans won in midterm elections is smaller than the core of Freedom Caucus representatives determined to remake the U.S. politics in part by reshaping the political system. They're demanding rule changes that would give more influence to individual representatives, eroding the power of party elders. Yes, absolutely. That's a good thing. They want to pledge to balance budgets, advocating government shutdowns over new borrowing, a vote on term limits, and consideration of a border plan advocated by Texas Republicans that would include deporting more people than completing construction of Trump's border wall. And completing construction of Trump's border wall. I was going to say the Texans are very pro border wall, and it's a mess. It's a terrible thing what they're doing to Texans and people who live in those border communities right now. You should check it out. I mean, they're overwhelmed. They don't have the resources to deal with this, and it's supposed to be a federal mandate. It's the national border. Back to the article. Quote: this country needs leadership that does not reflect this city, this town that is badly broken, close quote, said Texas Republican Chip Roy. He pledged to hold fast against Mr. McCarthy and until he has received pledges to stop debt spending, address border issues, and quit funding, quote, bureaucrats that are stepping over the freedoms of the American people, close quote. And yeah, that's what we see happening in Ottawa as well. Like Justin Trudeau says, he just does whatever the public service tells him. So it's those kind of cosmopolitan elitists, insiders in the swampy halls of power that in the U.S. it's D.C. We have the same problem in Ottawa. Like we saw in the previous article, they hate us. Florida Republican Matt Gaetz dismissed Mr. McCarthy as too wedded to the establishment to make such changes. Far-right conservatives are also furious that Mr. McCarthy delivered financial support to more traditional candidates in primary races. Quote, if you want to drain the swamps, you cannot put the biggest alligator in charge of the exercise, close quote, Mr. Gaetz said. Now, Matt Gaetz, I found, has been pretty solid over the last few years. And yeah, that's what this is really kind of coming down to, is we have a lot of like next generation right-leaning individualist people that are coming up and saying, you boomers are hypocrites and you're all in bed together and you all want the same things. You're just kind of playing this game between left and right, where the left goes there faster and the right goes there slower. But in the end, all the generations coming up after you end up with serfdom and poverty. So. All right. It has been a century since the U.S. Congress has taken multiple ballots to confirm a House Speaker in 1855 to 1856. Meanwhile, it took 133 ballots and 2 months in a historical era that the U.S. House of Representatives, in its own records, describes as marked by, quote, a poisoned and deteriorating political climate, close quote, amid, quote, conflict over slavery and a rising anti-immigrant mood in the nation, close quote. And those are, so back that far, political climate, conflict over slavery, and yeah. So that sounds like Civil War era stuff. And this is the anti-immigrant thing. This is probably another attitude that comes out of fourth turnings, because as far as I can tell, going all the way back to the collapse of the Roman Empire, that was something that was happening in fourth turnings, where the people in charge, they basically betray the soldiers who have served the country. And when they start saying, like, we quit, this isn't the country that we've signed up to serve, they bring in immigrants and they start filling the ranks with those. And what happened in the Roman Empire is that they were using the barbarian tribesmen that they used to fight and filling the ranks with them. But the problem with that is that they're effectively mercs. Okay, they're mercenaries. Whereas the people who were raised by the society are the ones who feel the debt of service to it. The society is who makes them who they are, and if they believe that it's a great society, then they should probably want to pay that forward for the next generations and do their service. But that's not the case when you just kind of bring in, you can't treat people like they're just numbers on a spreadsheet. When you just bring people who don't feel that debt of service to the society in there, then you can't expect the same level of commitment. And that's what happens with the Romans. Is it's a slow, gradual collapse and end of an empire. And that's pretty much where we are right now. And that's why I talk about this stuff so much, because if the empire collapses at this point, it's going to be Orwell's prophecy the world over, that of a jackboot stamping on the human face forever. Because we have the means, we have the technological means to do that now. Global prison planet. That's bleak. So this year, the 20 renegade Republicans have nominated several alternatives to Mr. McCarthy, including Florida Representative Byron Donalds. Mr. Donalds is Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat nominee for Speaker, are both black. The House has never before nominated 2 black candidates for Speaker. Those backing Mr. Donalds want a reversal of the centralization of power that Newt Gingrich perfected as House Speaker for the Republicans and Nancy Pelosi largely upheld for Democrats. Yeah, Nazi Pelosi has been a disaster. Quote, far too long conservatives left their leverage on the table and let the establishment ignore us and sideline us, close quote. Mrs. Boebert tweeted Wednesday. Quote, real leadership is realizing that consolidating power in one person is unacceptable, close quote. And yeah, I think that is a very strong statement there. Human beings, they can't really handle having power over the people. And so we should avoid concentrations of power to the greatest extent possible, because concentrations of power will lead to cruelty reliably. So back to the article. But they are also taking advantage of a political environment that has delivered razor-thin margins between Republicans and Democrats, a phenomenon Professor Fiorina called unstable majorities in the title of his 2017 book. Quote, in the old days, if these people had tried to mount this kind of a revolt, it would have been squashed like a bug, close quote, he said. Quote, now the fact is, with the majority so slim, these people have the leverage. The leadership just doesn't have the power to squash them. Yeah, that's because they're different people, and the people coming up behind the leadership, the boomer leadership, the boomer hegemony, they're more and more starting to scream like, you can't have all the wealth boomers. You have to leave us with some of the wealth here. We want to have lives and careers and own property, not live in the pod and eat the bugs. And Gen Z is getting quite active now, as we've noted on this program before. Okay, so that suggests the week's fractious battles of the House Speaker are a foretaste of what is to come. Republicans have already abandoned many of the traditional elements of the electoral politics, including the creation of a party platform in 2020. In 2022, some of the most pitched battles were inside the party between establishment Republicans and supporters of Mr. Trump's style of politics. Now these battles are poised to influence how the U.S. Congress operates in the next 2 years. So really, like Trump's style of politics, that's a response. He picked up, according to Ann Coulter, he picked up that, I forget how she put it, but he picked up the golden card, because the topic that none of the establishment Republicans would talk about was issues that were due to the irresponsible immigration policies in the states at the time, especially at the southern border. And Trump just kind of picked up that golden ticket. He realized that there was a growing concern over this, and none of the establishment so-called leadership would even address it. So that was kind of how it started. That's how he got the initial momentum. Now those battles are poised to influence how the U.S. Congress operates over the next 2 years. Quote, the Republicans are just in a really difficult situation because their margin is so small and this bloc is so determined, close quote, said Eddie Goldberg, a professor of Emirata at the political scientist. That doesn't make sense. A professor emerita of political scientist at the University of Michigan. Pretty sure it's political science. Quote, they want to be able to stymie things if they are not going their way, close quote. Isn't that just projection? Aren't the establishment Republicans the ones that are saying no, 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 it's got to be our way. We don't want to listen to new ideas. Yeah, this is the kind of double think that we'll see the Globe and Fail engaging in as long as they are bailout media. They're never going to bite the hand that feeds them. They're always going to go after the other side like this. So the Matter for Speakle offered up the opportunity to exercise that influence. Quote, "This is an effort to wield as much power as they can possibly wield," close quote, said Professor Goldberg. I don't know how you're coming to that conclusion, man. Like, it's a democratic process. We have a changing of the guard from the old to the new. I'll show you what I mean here in 1 second. And this is about as razor thin as it comes to assessing these things. So here's Kevin McCarthy. You know, he's got a bit of a different background. This is the establishment guy, basically. And he is, let me see, he's born 1965. So that's about as close a line as you can draw between establishment and kind of new order in the fourth turning sense. Because as I was saying before, the definition of boomer, it could go all the way to 65, 45 to 65, I think is what Pew says. But and I think that Bruce Cannon Gibney actually puts it a little further out there to about 67 or so because of the low rates of breastfeeding and the permissive parenting style and the birth rates kind of extended out to those dates as well. So this is kind of the gray area where you need to start asking the more difficult questions about every individual on an individual basis. Just like, okay, so was this guy raised in a permissive parenting style? You know, does he appear to be kind of spoiled and weak? Was he breastfed? Or is he like, you know, one of the guys who got only 70% of what the rest of us did on the SAT scores back then? Because that was a real problem. As they were writing the SATs, they dropped by 30%. Okay, so I would kind of put this guy, like, he's establishment, he's 65, he's right on the border, age 57, that's kind of moving up there toward the boomer territory. So strictly speaking, we could categorize him as Gen X, or we could categorize him as boomer. He's probably, like, you know, a mixture of the two, really. And he seems to be leaning boomer because he's more establishment Republican. He's more for the old ideas. And just a couple of things out of here, because, and again, I've said this before, but Wikipedia is progressive propaganda. Let's see what they have to say about Kevin McCarthy here. I thought this was interesting. It says McCarthy was a steady defender of former President Donald Trump for most of his time as majority leader and minority leader. After Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election, McCarthy supported Trump's false denial of Biden's victory and participated in efforts to overturn the results. So that's a pretty definitive statement. Trump's false denial of Biden's victory. Even Time Magazine has published an article now saying that, yeah, it really was because we put our finger on the scale, mostly through ballot harvesting and a kind of cabal behind the scenes that were kind of pulling strings for Joe Biden in the election. But that was even they're saying that. Time Magazine is saying no, it wasn't exactly free or fair. McCarthy later condemned the January 6th United States Capitol attack and said the 2020 election was legitimate. So he flopped, is what he did. And it wasn't the January 6th Capitol attack. It was a Capitol riot, I think is about as strong as I can describe it. We saw Ray Epps inciting the breach of the barricades on one side of the building. That was the side that the news showed us. But on the other side, the bulk of the protest was walking past, and people were being invited in by police, Capitol Police, only to be arrested thereafter on trespassing charges, and then interned for over a year. And a lot of them are still in jail on those trespassing charges, as I understand it. That kind of shows a lack of courage on my part, or on his part, in my view. And that's the thing, is I don't think he did a real deep dive into what happened with January 6th. It became sort of politically inconvenient for him. So he flopped. He folded like a cheap lawn chair. And then we have Jim Jordan. Now, the interesting thing, again, is he is age 58. So he's actually older than the guy that I'm putting in there as a boomer. But it's one of these things that's very hard to define. And he's Where is he from? I wonder how rural he is, because I'm always asking the question, like there's a difference between the cosmopolitan and elite types that kind of grow up in the city areas, and the guys that are coming in from the more rural areas. Like people from rural areas are achieving just as high a level of education as everybody else is in the cities, but they come at problems very differently, having been cultured very differently. So here's what they say here. They say Jordan is a close ally of former President Trump. During Trump's presidency, Jordan sought to discredit investigations into Russian interference in the 2016 election and staged a sit-in to prevent Trump impeachment inquiry hearing over the Trump-Zelensky telephone controversy. After Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election and Trump tried to overturn the election, that's just ridiculous. Trump tried to overturn the election. Like he led a protest, I guess, but it's not an insurrection. They're trying to make it okay. So Jordan supported the protest was to audit the election, not to overturn it. Jordan supported lawsuits to challenge the election results and voted not to certify the Electoral College results. He has refused to cooperate with the United States House Select Committee in connection with the January 6, 2021 storming of the U.S. Capitol by election fraud protesters, which subpoenaed him in May 12, 2022. So, I think the difference here is this guy has a backbone, okay? He has been consistent throughout, and that's why he's gaining the support. And he doesn't have to keep track of his lies. You know, when he gets up there and he speaks, you can tell, like, he's got the conviction, and he's really kind of saying all the right principled statements, I think. So that's kind of the difference that I'm seeing is this guy is establishment. He's a little wishy-washy. And let me see now, where is he from? Does it say? Okay, I'm not going to dive in any deeper than this, but that's the key difference here, I think, is the guy who stayed with his principles here, who stuck to his guns over, the whole January 6th and the election fraud issue, I guess. So he started out kind of on the right side of things, and then he folded under the pressure. And then we got Jim Jordan here, who did not fold under the pressure, and he's the one who is gaining support. And I've shown him before as being a kind of a pretty solid guy. But that's enough about American politics. Well, this is American as well. I stumbled on this because it's Ottawa, and I was looking for something going on in Ottawa because hashtag Ottawa was trending today. And it turns out that this is actually Missouri, down in the United States. But this is another interesting kind of fourth turning take where it says, let me see, quote, "Where you belong," close quote, Ottawa County motto helped to promote, quote, "divisive Marxist ideology," close quote, a new elected leaders say. So what's interesting about this is that, elections are taking place all over the place in the United States, like all the time. And younger people are starting to get involved, and they're coming in saying things like this: divisive Marxist ideology is to blame for things that are going wrong right now. So the current crisis, I would say. Okay, so West Olive, Missouri, Ottawa County's, quote, "Where you belong," close quote, motto needed to change, the county's new leader said. The 6-year-old model has been used to, quote, "promote the divisive Marxist ideology of the race equity movement," close quote, according to a resolution passed Tuesday, January 3rd, and supported by a majority of the county's just sworn-in leaders. And it further helped establish a racial equity office, quote, "on the premise that the county resident characteristics of being 90% white and largely conservative were problematic for businesses," close quote. So on Tuesday, when a majority of further right-leaning Ottawa county commissioners were seated for the first time, they changed the motto to, quote, "where freedom rings," close quote, by a 7-1 vote. So that's an overwhelming change right there, 7-1. And they changed the motto to "where freedom rings." Okay. It's a motto, they say, still affirms that all people belong, but one that also guarantees constitutional rights are protected and honors American exceptionalism. Quote, "We affirm where freedom rings, where individuals' freedoms, parental rights, and freedom of religion and conscience are protected, all people belong," close quote. The resolution enacted the motto change states. Yeah, so that sounds pretty good. Freedom of conscience. Yeah, you're free to think whatever you want, and nobody's going to you shouldn't face this kind of backlash and coercion and stuff to express a counterconscious belief like we do here in Canada, especially after Bill C-16, which was the one to bring gender identity and gender expression into the Canadian Human Rights Act, and that kind of thrusted Professor Jordan Peterson onto the scene to begin with, because it is a kind of legal obligation for free-thinking people to express a counterconscious belief. So, compelled speech, that's what he talks about. It's compelled speech. The new motto will now be in official documents and all the pages of the county's website adjacent to the county seal. The old motto of where you belong dates back to 2017 when the county underwent a rebranding to be more welcoming to the migration of Michiganders to the county that helped make the state's fastest growing county between 2010 and 2020. At the time, then Ottawa County Administrator Al Vandenberg said the motto was intended to let everyone know that regardless of race, ethnic background, sexual identity, religion, or any other qualifier, they were welcome in Ottawa County. The rebranding that year also included changing the county's seal from the American Indian Chief to the current one, which features trees, open space, shoreline, and sunset. The logo wasn't changed too, to say. The new motto was among the number of sweeping changes made by the newly seated board during their first meeting Tuesday. 9 of the board's 11 members are either members of or endorsed by Ottawa Impact, a group of Republicans that campaigned on frustrations over social issues and the county health department's mandate to mask school children. So that's what we're seeing, is it's a backlash for the policy leading into this crisis, and we're seeing a generational change of leadership that will facilitate a resolution to this crisis. It's a generational change in leadership that needs to take place. The group ousted several Republican incumbents from the board in August 2022 primary. On Tuesday, the new board also fired the county administrators and replaced him with a failed Republican congressional candidate, Jim Gibbs, replaced the county's administrative health officer, shuttered the county's relatively new Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. That's a DIE, as in diversity, inclusion, and equity. So that's a heck of that's what happens to these institutions and these organizations die when they implement these policies. Get woke, go broke. That's what they say. And replaced Ottawa County Corporate Counsel Doug Van Eason with Kelman Legal Group, a champion of conservative causes. Okay, so that's enough American news, I think, to illustrate my point. I think what's happening is their fourth turning might be a couple of years ahead of ours. Like, the global financial crisis really started with the boomers reaching peak institutional power in the financial markets, especially in the United States, and that's what precipitated the collapse. Is they got there fraudulently their whole careers, and then paid themselves the bailout, the big bonuses for the CEOs, and laid off all the other generations in the trades who didn't create the problem in the first place. So we're seeing this. A lot of the things that happened, you can see where you belong. That was a change made in 2017. So that's during the fourth turning, as in since 2008. And that's what a lot of this is, I think, is we've seen these kind of radical policies since the boomers reached peak institutional power in 2008, really kind of go full throttle. Because there's nobody holding them back right now. They don't answer to anybody, so they can get away with a lot more. People are reacting to what has been happening during the fourth turning and saying, no, we want to go back to something like a first or a second turning. First turning is probably the best one, but just make sure we don't indulge our children with any of that nonsense about permissive parenting. Okay. So here we are on to Jordan Peterson, and he's been making headlines here. This is the Professor Peterson's proposed punishment segment of the podcast. Here he is tweeting. It says, breaking, the Ontario College of Psychologists has demanded that I submit myself to mandatory social media communication retraining with their experts for, among other crimes, retweeting at Pierre Poilievre and criticizing at Justin Trudeau and his political allies. And Elon Musk is replying to this, and he's given the double exclamation point there. I think those are supposed to be like shocked eyeballs or something. I'm not really up on my emojis, and everybody here is kind of saying the same thing. Retraining, they're going to 100%. They're going 100% forward with the 1984 playbook, huh? And Elon Musk is saying sounds like it. And Rebel News is coming at Elon and saying, would it be possible to get the Canada Twitter files? And everybody's kind of saying that to Elon. Here's Ian Miles Chong. The Canadian Twitter files could shed some light on whether and how the Trudeau government collaborated with social media platforms. So this is really interesting. Elon Musk is sitting up and he's taking notice, and it really seems like he's sort of setting the tone on Twitter, and he's doing a lot in terms of leadership, whether he means to or not, for the freedom movement. And yeah, he's very much in agreement that this is a problem for Canada, with Jordan Peterson getting his attention. So hopefully we start to see a little bit more open up in terms of the Canadian Twitter files sometime soon. And this is a pretty good article here, National Telegraph. Ontario College of Psychologists attempt to strip Jordan Peterson of his license. This is written by Mark Petroni. And he says, Canadian psychologist and author Dr. Jordan Peterson could be stripped of his license to practice clinical psychology over his sharing of political posts on social media. The College of Psychologists of Ontario, which regulates the profession in his home province, has disciplined Peterson over the sharing of political posts on Twitter. Peterson says he got in hot water with the college because he retweeted posts about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre, Trudeau advisor Gerald Butts, New Zealand PM Jacinda Ardern, and others. The college has ordered Peterson to undergo mandatory social media communication retraining to, quote, modify his objectionable behavior, close quote. Oh, God. It's unclear what it is about, the tweets or a sharing of them that may violate the college's code of ethics. Either way, Peterson says he will not comply. Quotes, I have absolutely refused to do so, close quote, said Peterson. The next step for the college is to demand he submit an in-person disciplinary hearing. If Peterson does not satisfy the college and commit to changing his behavior, it could strip him of his license to practice. And this is the kind of coercion that we're seeing right now to silence all of the professionals. And people are out there saying things like, oh yeah, all the experts agree. Well, why do they agree? Is it for a good reason, as in sufficient evidence plus logic yields reason? Or is it because they're all being attacked and coerced to toe the party line? Well, obviously it's the latter. Going after Jordan Peterson, like this is, I would say, bold. So, quote, Canada has been given over to the commissaires, close quote, Peterson said. Quote, something I have never thought to see in my lifetime. Something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, close quote. He says he'll make the issue public in the days ahead. Some of the posts may be drawing the ire of the college, include the one on December 24th, in which Peterson tweeted out a link to Conrad Black's column in the National Post, a moral imperative for Trudeau Liberals to resign. Yeah, Conrad came out pretty hard against the Liberals. I don't know that it's going to mean a lot to them because they just kind of go, oh, that yucky Conrad. They think if you're on the other side, then you're evil. You can just be written off. And it's the with us or against us mantra. George W. Bush, right? Boomer. So if you're not with us, then you're against us. Then on December 27th, he tweeted, I learned to watch for people's psychological age during my years doing intensive clinical work. At Justin Trudeau appears to me to be perpetually 14 years old. I think that's pretty spot on. That's pretty much what it is. And that's probably why he goes after his students, I guess, in the non-disclosure agreement he signed with a young student in his last teaching job when he left it in the middle of a semester mysteriously. He probably sees himself as a peer to somebody like that. He's one of their peers. And he just doesn't see anything wrong with dating in that age range, I don't think. Okay, so here's the tweet, Dr. Jordan Peterson, just like it says in the quote there. And this is real Andy Lee. Trudeau, reflection on what is the reflection we have got to have on using the Emergencies Act is how are so many people hurting so much at the anger against the policy or the government would bleed out into them not caring about their impacting their fellow citizens in a terrible way. A lot of the anger was at you. So this is the Rosemary Barton clip. It's pretty good. I guess I'll go ahead and show that.
Fact inquiry. Do you think the country suffered any long-term damage because you invoked the Emergencies Act? No, I don't think because I invoked, it was in there for 9 days. It did, in a very limited way, the job that it was brought in to do. Nobody got seriously injured. Nobody had any lasting effects from it, and it cleared the situation. And there's the kind of accountability and transparency.
The woman who was trampled by the Clydesdale did suffer a broken collarbone, and there was a man who was trampled as well, and we're still trying to figure out if he's even alive. So whether there were any lasting effects, I don't know how they're coming to this conclusion that there were no lasting effects. I mean, this is we're still dealing with the fallout of this, and you know, people still have charges hanging over their heads, myself included. So this is utter nonsense. But
Transparency that the commission's providing. I think it's unfortunate.
Okay, never mind. Trudeau, go away. All right. Even the German socialists have figured this out. Are you watching at Justin Trudeau? The man who claimed there is, quote, no business case, close quote, for supplying our German allies in the face of the Russian war with LNG. And that was a big thing for the Second World War too. It really kind of came down to the oil and crippling that German machine, you know, in terms of controlling the oil. But yeah, why? It's all wrong that the Germans are on Russian oil when we have LNG over here. And bitumen has been showing a lot of promise in terms of overseas shipping, you know, the bitumen balls that will float on the surface of the ocean and all that stuff. So there's all kinds of opportunity for us to be providing ethical energy to Europe and to overseas partners. But we're just not doing it because that's blasphemy in the dogma of wokeness, right? Whatever human beings are doing to thrive is very clearly heretical, because Mother Nature is the good guy and humans are the bad guys. So it's all just kind of Marxism applied to climate and the environment. So Net Zero Watch. So Jordan Peterson is retweeting Net Zero Watch here. He says Germany's finance minister has renewed his call for allowing fracking technology to increase gas supplies. Quote, the ban should be lifted, close quote, he said, urging the government to let investors decide whether extraction is economical. And the government in Nova Scotia needs to do that too, I think. Governments everywhere seem to need to lift bans on the mining of resources, you know, like in Nova Scotia, it's deep sea drilling and uranium. Okay. And yeah, same thing. This is Jordan Peterson just saying that Justin Trudeau is a 14-year-old, and you can tell just by the look on his face and the way he's sitting, he's a very naive fellow. Has Jordan Peterson become the government of Canada's latest political target for holding the wrong opinion? This article was originally posted on the Honking for Freedom Substack, which can be found linked here. Okay. Honking for Freedom Substack. That's the previous one, and there's the video. Okay, so that was earlier in the day, and then Jordan Peterson came back after that, making that announcement. He says, to clarify, it has been decided I either submit to social media communication retraining or face a disciplinary hearing and possible suspension of my clinical license and the right to represent myself as a psychologist. And here's Elon Musk. He says, that is extremely concerning. And then Peterson comes in again and he says, I am mounting a constitutional challenge, but I have little faith in the remaining integrity of the Canadian judiciary. The reason is because you're going to have to go through a boomer judge. And I can't believe I am now faced with the necessity of doing such things and not believing they will work. And here's Elon Musk. He says, please live stream this on Twitter Spaces. And Jordan B. Peterson says, I will make sure the disciplinary hearing, if and when it occurs, is made accessible on my YouTube channel at Elon Musk. Yeah, we got to get away from YouTube, though, Dr. Peterson. So, yeah, and Elon is trying to act as a facilitator here, I think. He's really dissented from the big tech oligarchs. Because the big tech oligarchs really are the boomers at this moment in our history. And Elon is kind of the first, well, he's the richest man in the world right now, the richest one with a declared income anyway. So he's a new class of billionaire. He's the Gen Xer billionaire, and he's kind of breaking ranks with the establishment. Okay, and here we have the National Compost. And I call it that because it's post media. and they're the biggest recipients of Trudeau's bailout funding. So they're supposed to be right-leaning, but the hand that feeds them is left. So that's something to consider whenever you're reading anything that's put out there by them. Although I do find they do have a few good columnists. What was her name? I remember Christy Blatchford was great. She just died a few years ago, and Conrad Black is just a Canadian legend in his own right too. Very intelligent guy. Okay, Psychologist College silent on Jordan Peterson's sanction. Jordan Peterson says the Ontario College of Psychologists has proposed disciplinary action after more than a dozen complaints were made about him. The Ontario College of Psychologists says it's unable to discuss why it's allegedly taking disciplinary action and trying to force social media training on Canadian commentary and psychologist Jordan Peterson. He's also a professor. In an opinion piece in the National Post, Peterson says he faces more than a dozen complaints from the public. They also all come since his, quote, rise to public prominence, close quote. He said, adding he faced none in the prior 20 years as practicing psychologist in Ontario. And that all started with him speaking out against Bill C-16, which is the one that brought the transgender ideology into the Canadian Human Rights Act as prohibited grounds for discrimination, effectively mandating speech, effectively mandating the use of preferred pronouns. Okay, in documents that Peterson posted to Twitter, the college says that Peterson, quote, may have lacked professionalism, close quote, in social media posts and in a podcast appearance from January 2022, potentially an episode with Joe Rogan, in the former Fear Factor host and comedian, in which he claimed there's no such thing as climate. The specific concerning comments are not identified. The document which sets out a coaching plan for Peterson says Peterson must, quote, review, reflect on, and ameliorate my professionalism in public statements, close quote, and that it will cost up to $225 per hour. Here are the demands. So let's just take a look at that, I think. Okay, acknowledgement and undertaking of Jordan Peterson, PhD and clinical psychologist to the College of Psychologists of Ontario. 1, I acknowledge that the Inquiries, Complaints, and Reports Committee of the College of Psychologists of Ontario is concerned about the following aspects of my public statements contained in the Registrar's report dated May 17, 2022, that I have a lack of professionalism of public statements made on social media and during a January 25th, 2022 podcast appearance. In light of the concerns expressed by the ICRC, I hereby undertake to do the following. Coaching program. I undertake to do the work either with Dr. Erica Abner, all those post nominals, Gail Siskin, to review, reflect on, and ameliorate my professionalism in public statements. I will complete the coaching program within 6 months of receiving the ICRC decision in this matter on the basis of the progress of the coaching program. The coach may, at their discretion, request that the registrar shorten or extend the coaching program. And this is, I have formally indicated my refusal. I'm glad, because this is like next level stuff. This is Stalinist, re-education. And that is what they did in Stalinism. I mean, if you had a problem with the way the regime was doing things, then there must have been something wrong with you. They'd ship you off to the psych wards, if not the gulags. Oh, here it is. Peterson, who is also a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto, said on Twitter he has formally indicated that he will not comply. The college's website indicates that Peterson has sought judicial review of the college's disciplinary proceedings. The post sought comment from the Ontario College of Psychologists and put a number of questions to Rick Morris, the college's executive director, but he said that due to Ontario privacy legislation, the college is, quote, not authorized to discuss this matter, close quote. The stakes are heightened by the controversial professor's fame and research, including 3.6 million Twitter followers. Well, he just got back on, didn't he? His tweets on the college's action prompted several alarmed responses from Twitter CEO Elon Musk, one of the world's richest men, who called it extremely concerning. So that's the same thing that we were just looking at. Peterson capitulated to, catapulted. Peterson catapulted to fame in 2016 following his public objections to specific provisions of legislation that would add protections for transgender people to Canada's human rights code. Peterson has since become a widely read and popular cultural critic. His 2 books, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, and Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life, are bestsellers. At present, he hosts a podcast for Ben Shapiro's right-wing media company, The Daily Wire, and is completing a worldwide speaking tour. The complaints against him, he says, are due primarily to his views on politics. He identifies 4 specific complaints, including making a joke about New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, retweeting Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative Party leader, criticizing Trudeau for his former principal, Secretary Gerald Butts, whom Peterson last February called, quote, stunningly corrupt and incendiary fool, close quote, prompting threats of legal retaliation from Butts. Yeah, so I think we see what's going on here, right? It's the position that he takes. It's the side that he's on. They're picking sides. You're with us or against us, and they're going after him, right? Peterson has yet to make public the details of any remaining complaints, beyond noting that the complaints he is accused of being sexist, transphobic, incapable of the requisite body of positivity in relationships to morbid obesity, and unforgivably of all, a climate change denialist. Okay. Peterson, so it's a blasphemer. That's what he's accused of here. He has blasphemed the woke dogma, and you could basically boil down everything he's been accused of here as a heretic, right? They're accusing him of heresy. Peterson's private practice has been suspended since 2017 when he says he was, quote, my rising notoriety or fame made continuing as a private therapist practically and ethically impossible, close quote. Yet in 2018, Peterson agreed to a plan to improve his clinical practice. While there are a few details of what constituted professional misconduct, the complaint against him had to do with the quality of his service, psychologist-patient boundaries, and the way he communicates with his patients. Yeah, okay, this is all very vague. Peterson says that none of the people who have levied complaints against him are or have ever been his clients, and says that half of them falsely claim to be patients. The college declined to address the specific allegation. Well, there's a reason for that, right? Because it impacts their credibility negatively. Indeed, Peterson threatens to make, quote, every single word of his legal battle fully public, close quote. Quote, I'm going to say what I have to say and let the chips fall where they will. I think where they may would have been better there. There's an alliteration that he missed. I will have done nothing to compromise those in my care. Quite the contrary, I have served all my clients and the millions of people I am communicating with to the best of my ability and in good faith. And that's that. Close quote, he writes. So that's that, folks. Jordan Peterson looks like he's going to war with his own professional establishment, and that's the state of affairs right now. Is the institutions have been turned against the people, and it's because we're in a fourth turning. So here's Brian Lilly. I've referred to him as controlled opposition in the past. I think it's more because he's kind of an Ottawa insider, and his girlfriend is, on the left or something like that. But he really has kind of in the last few years really kind of gone like very far left relative to where he was, I think, a few years ago. He doesn't seem as hard-hitting or as sincere as he was all that long ago. So I like to keep an eye on him. So Lilly, Jordan Peterson launches court challenge as College of Psychologists attempts to pull license over social media posts. Okay. And so it says, the complaints against him and the attempt to pull his license are all political, Jordan Peterson tells me over the phone. He's decided to finally push back against the College of Psychologists of Ontario after a demand that he submit to social media re-education or lose his license. Peterson has filed an application for judicial review with the Ontario Divisional Court, and he is now speaking openly about the barrage of politically motivated complaints. On Tuesday, Peterson took to Twitter, the social media platform that could be called the scene of his many, quote, crimes, to say enough is enough. Quote, I practiced for 20 years without being investigated. This only started when I became a prominent public figure, close quote, Peterson said in a phone interview Wednesday morning. He said that ever since he rose to public prominence in 2016, he's been facing nonstop complaints. He had to hire lawyers and to handle the complaints with the college. Quote, all I want to do is tell people what is happening, close quote, Peterson said. Part of what is happening is an attempt at lawfare by people opposed to what Peterson says he believes. A review of some of the complaints shows people who don't live in Canada using American examples to ask the college to punish Peterson over social media postings. In January 2022, Peterson was tweeting that the world could handle a larger population if handled right, something that goes against the mantra claimed by some that we are overpopulated and harming the planet. Roger Palfrey, a man who describes himself as a scientist and educator, said he disagreed and claimed the world is already overpopulated. You're free to leave at any point, Peterson tweeted. Okay, so here's Roger Palfrey. He says, I disagree based on the record of human behavior. We are already overpopulated. This small world, any arguments I have heard for supporting such large human population completely overlooked the huge loss of species and ecosystems resulting from our self-absorbed attention. You know, the spaces are greening again. Like, my understanding is that we have actually more green forest in North America than we did, even a couple of 100 years ago. When we're taking stuff out of the ground to burn for fuel, to keep us warm for our survival, we tend not to cut down as many trees that are on the surface. The demand for lumber goes down as we introduce new technologies for fossil fuels or alternate sources of heat. Anyway, this is mythologistic. I find it's a doomsday cult. It goes, they're very Malthusian. And is it Thomas Malthus? He was the one that predicted like a couple 100 years ago that we were reaching the kind of a crisis level population, a crisis level of overpopulation on the planet. But we innovate our way out of it. We invent new technologies. We're producing just as much food as we were back then on 2% of the land mass because of, modern farming technologies, and the list goes on. So this idea that we're already overpopulated, I find to be a very specious one. What we need, if anything, are probably more people, more geniuses, more innovations to get us off this rock before we get hit by another asteroid or comet and set back to the Stone Age again or worse. So the American behind the complaint said that Peterson was advocating for suicide, a leap in logic if ever there was one. Another complaint was filed against Peterson in February 2022 when he questioned the wisdom of Ottawa's interim police chief, Steve Bell, that's Tinker Bell, saying that he was looking at how to remove children from the Freedom Convoy protests in Ottawa. Peterson tweeted a video of the statement and said, "Children removed? How exactly? Why exactly? By whom exactly? Sent to where exactly, and for how long exactly? Think this through, Canadians. This is a bad decision." Absolutely. Like, these are not decisions to be taken lightly by this careerist Tinkerbell coward who's just kind of looking to punch out at the top of his game at the end of his career. He went after this position, and he's been replaced, hasn't he? So good. I hope he goes down in the annals of history as a real scumbag. The complaint is that Peterson, as a psychologist, must report children at risk. Whatever your political view of the convoy, there was not, at the time, any evidence of children being at risk from being present, just as political opposition to the protests, and therefore to children being present. Okay. I can't blame him for calling that out. In May 2022, a complaint was filed after Peterson retweeted a New York Post article about Yumi Nu being unveiled as the cover model for the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. Nu, a plus-size model, was featured in revealing swimsuit, but Peterson didn't find it appealing. Quote, "Sorry, not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance is going to change that," close quote, Peterson tweeted. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and while many will disagree with Peterson and many will disagree his statement, his statement on Twitter about swimsuit model is hardly an issue for the College of Psychologists of Ontario. Yeah, so that's a fair statement, Toronto Sun. And Brian Lilly, it's hardly an issue for the College of Physicians of Ontario. This has nothing to do with his clinical practice. It's a kind of lawfare that's been inflicted on everybody who is critical of the communist establishment. So The college has declined comment on this issue and cited privacy when asked a series of questions. The letter to Peterson, though, informed him that if he did undergo the remedial social media training they require, that would be made public. A sort of stain on the public record. Quote, the panel has yet to make a decision, but maintains its serious concerns about your professionalism in public statements, close quote. The letter from the college states. It then goes on to detail their wish for Peterson to undergo training through either of their two preferred experts in social media behavior and professionalism. While the letter states that Peterson would not have to admit wrongdoing, the college then provides a statement for him to sign in which he would admit to unprofessional conduct. Quote, that I may have lacked professionalism in public statements made on social media and during January 25th, 2022 podcast appearance, close quote. The statement reads, that I may have lacked professionalism. So they slip that in there so they can say, oh, no, you're not really admitting fault. You see, we're just making it look like you're admitting a lack of professionalism, but you're not really. So it's so underhanded and just so gross. The podcast mentioned that it was an appearance by Peterson on Joe Rogan's top-rated podcast. In addition to these complaints, Peterson said that other complaints include that he retweeted Pierre Poilievre and made critical comments about Justin Trudeau and Gerald Butts. Again, issues that have nothing to do with the practice of psychology, but Peterson said that the college has made up its mind and is looking to sentence him for his supposed crimes. Blasphemy, right? Quote, they have 5 levels of sanction, and they've already put the second highest level of sanctions upon me, and they see me as likely to reoffend, close quote, Peterson said. He said the politicization of the colleges regulating professionals in Ontario and across Canada puts the care and legal advice we should all receive at risk because professionals will be afraid to give their best advice. That sentiment was backed up by one lawyer who emailed Wednesday to support Peterson. Quote, every lawyer in Canada should be working pro bono on this case. It affects all of us, no matter one's politics, close quote, the lawyer said. Of course, statements like that need to be made quietly to make sure the Law Society doesn't come calling. Jordan Peterson has decided to fight back by launching a court challenge. It's a battle he needs to win, and everyone should back him on it. So good job on that one, Brian Lilly. It's nice to see that, at least he has a spine on some issues. All right. And this is another thing that has been trending lately on Twitter. There's a lot of the stuff, hashtag Let Women Speak, I find is an interesting thing to be trending right now. 2023 will be the battle ground for women and safe spaces. Even the word woman is being removed, so stand tall and back the brave who speak out. Hashtag Let Women Speak. So this is Pat Wewolnik. I don't know who this is really on Twitter. I just kind of picked it up from the trends. And it is this hashtag Let Women Speak that is trending. And we have a meme here where a gentleman is refusing a drink. He's putting his hand out to say no thank you. And say no to men and women's spaces, men and women's sports, sterilization of children, silencing of women. I mean, those are all things we should be saying no to, right, guys? Men and women's spaces, men and women's sports, sterilization of children, silencing of women. And he's saying no. It says, don't drink the gender Kool-Aid. Yeah, because that's what it is. They don't have any evidence to support their positions. It's just do as we, or believe as we believe, or we'll hurt you. So here we have women's rights networks. They're kind of coming together. But okay, wait a second. This is the one that I found interesting. This is somebody kind of speaking out on this, the Let Women Speak side of things. So let's hear what she has to say.
Many have asked me why I've become so vocal about women's rights in recent months. Well, a few years ago, I stuck my head above the parapet in defense of J.K. Rowling and was so badly trolled that to my shame, I stuck my head back down. But no more. I have 3 little granddaughters to think of. And if any of them show gender non-conforming behavior, I don't want anyone whispering in their ears that maybe they're a little boy. Same with little boys. If they show gender non-conforming behavior like loving the ballet, I don't want someone whispering in their ear that maybe they're a girl. Leave our kids alone. I'd also like to be called a woman. I'm not a uterus carrier, a cervix haver, or a chest feeder. I am a woman. I know from the early relationship what it's like to experience domestic violence and to plan an escape route to a refuge. I want women who go to refuges and other safe spaces to feel safe. I also don't want women's rights when it comes to sports and awards and lists to be eroded. And with my lesbian, gay, and bisexual brothers and sisters, I don't want them called transphobic just because they are same-sex attracted. These and many other reasons mean I'm not going away, so you can control me all you want.
Okay, so I think that's a pretty brave statement by whoever that is. I don't really know, but I'm just watching the trends here, guys. And Ken is saying, we have noticed that in a lot of cases, this show is being shadow banned. Thanks for being here and supporting V4F. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. I'm tracking right now that I got like 20 viewers, but it was like 4 or 5 times that only yesterday at the same time. And I have been noticing an upward trend all this year, even though it's very early, until today. So something to note. Keep an eye on that. Okay. And next we have. So this is hashtag Let Women Speak USA. So Let Women Speak appears to be something to me that started over in Britain, and it's coming to the USA. There's a bit of a speaking tour. I wasn't really tracking this prior to it coming up in the in the Twitter trends here recently. So here's Audria Facciolini, I think I'm going to say. We will win. Sanity will prevail. The bullies will not stop us. And they're retweeting some. This is some, looks like Timcast footage, and this is from a Let Women Speak rally that I believe took place 15 November. Yeah, this took place last November, and this is actually trending again right now because this topic is heating up again in the new year. So. Yeah, it's bear with me here. This is a little hard to watch, but
these cities are more real than you.
So these are the counter demonstrators. You know, the trans rights activists, self-styled, that are there to counter protest the Let Women Speak event last November.
You better let 3 of these faggots, because I'm gonna beat your ass. I'm gonna beat your ass.
So this is obviously the clinical term here is natal male, so somebody who's born male and identifies as transgender. That's apparently what's going on here. And this person just threatened that natal female and woman with an ass beating, apparently.
I'm gonna beat your ass. Yes, I will. I will. These hands do not discriminate. These hands do not discriminate. I will fuck you up. I will fuck you up. With that 2030, I don't give a fuck.
I like this woman's sign. Trans rights is big pharma, big banks, propaganda. That is kind of the bottom line here, guys, is they're getting rich off it. Okay, they're going into the schools. These are the boomer school boards imposing this trans ideology on children, indoctrinating them, and sexually deranging them, essentially, systematically sexually confusing them, and offering them that out. You know, especially Western kids, Canadians. You know, if you're a white kid, you know, your society is evil and racist, and you need to atone, cast off your old society. And there's really no better way to kind of get that diversity card that you need to be in the club. It's an option that's available to young girls in particular to kind of you know, go on the hormones and get in the club and stop having to deal with all this gaslighting from the institution. As in, you know, O'Brien says to Winston on the torture machine in room 101 in 1984 that all you have to do to make all this pain go away is just believe 2 + 2 = 5. So anyway, it's a good sign. It really is the case that people are getting rich off of this, and the pension funds are really a big factor here because they rely on that constant growth of the market in order to secure pensions, boomer pensions, and entitlement programs. And really, this is kind of what's going on. Is they're turning our children into pharmacological livestock for profit, for big pharma.
These cities are more real than you would ever be, bitch. I got bodies. No man wants you. No man wants you. Let's go home. Let's go home. Not too slow. Not too slow. Not too slow. Church go home. Not too slow. Not too slow.
Yeah, sorry about that, but I like to go right down to what it is that we're talking about instead of just listening to other people tell me what's happening. So it is what it is. And so here's Red Moon Radical, and she says, here's the 23 turf olutions plus gender warriors worldwide. And we have 3 different colored hearts there. And just in case nobody's tracking, the term turf is a trans exclusionary radical feminist. I think Dave Chappelle counts himself as one. It's basically the LGBT, LGB without the T. And there is that kind of a like this is a divisive doctrine. It's a Marxist doctrine that divides, groups of people into groups of oppressors and groups of the oppressed, and it divides them down into smaller and smaller subcategories so that we just kind of pit all these imaginary minorities off one another and keep everybody at each other's throats. And it's all very much in line with the art of war, is to turn the people against each other, turn the state against the people, turn the people against the state, and just watch everything implode without ever having to fire a shot. So here we go.
So what would be a message you want to leave women with, or any American or anyone worldwide who's fighting against us or maybe afraid to speak out right now?
Now is the time.
I think just speak. You should be more afraid of staying silent.
Posey Parker says, Kelly J. Keane, the house is on fire. We have to get the kids out.
If you want to speak out, but you're afraid.
Be brave. And if you don't feel brave, fake it.
I understand the fear of speaking out.
It is a psychological journey, and
so Colleen is saying, I wonder how many of them we'll hear about in 5 years reversing their brainwashing. It's kind of sickening to think about it, but these kids are kind of making these irreversible decisions right now. And there are detransitioner networks out there. There was a subreddit for detransitioners. These are people who've undergone the biomedical gender transition and later regretted it and tried to go back, trying to tell their stories. And their subreddit was deleted, and they're suppressed all over the place. Like they have a detransitioners network, I think, in Canada. I think they use a salamander for a symbol for some reason. But you'd never be able to find them, right? Hopefully now that Twitter's opening up, we'll be able to start hearing from these people. But right now we're not allowed to hear from these people because that's not conducive to big pharma profits.
For anybody who's scared to speak up, you have to be honest with yourself about how mentally prepared you're willing to or how deep you're willing to go mentally, because I don't think you can prepare yourself for it, really.
I might lose my job. The house is absolutely on fire and it's under the floorboards. It's everywhere.
Wherever you are in the United States, within 50 miles, there's a girl having her breast removed. Whatever calendar day of the year, as long as it's a working day, there will be a girl having her breast removed within 50 miles of wherever you are in the country. You should be more afraid of that than speaking up.
So there's no amount of capitulation that'll be enough.
Like Mary Daly said, they're going to punish you if you sin this much. They're going to punish you if you just say, I don't want to put my pronouns in my profile.
Trans women are women, all of that stuff, parroting the mottos, none of that will save you from the consequences if this becomes the mass culture. So get the fuck up and fight it now.
If you're a parent, go to your school board, contact your local, state, and federal representatives and have meetings. They have to talk to you. They work for you. Your tax dollars pay their salaries. Make them listen to you.
I think you can just be honest with yourself on who you are and what your strategy is going to be. Definitely have a strategy. Like how people have a strategy when they're leaving an abusive husband. and they like start buying new passports a couple of months beforehand and things like that. You need a strategy, like kind of like an exit plan, because you are going to be exiled essentially.
Women in Iran are dying right now. You get to a point where you just can't keep letting people kick you around, and there's women that are actually dying.
All right. So a lot of brave women, I think, kind of coming out of the woodwork with that one. Yeah, I mean, it's encouraging. They're saying all the right things. And there is that one lady, I should probably commit her name to memory because I saw a couple other good clips with her there. She's the blonde British lady. And she's talking about, like, if you live in the United States, then very close to you today, there's, you know, an adolescent girl having her healthy breast tissue removed, or a young girl, young woman. Yeah, I mean, they're getting rich off it, guys. That's the only real reason. Yeah. So here we have pilots are suing the Biden regime over the vaccine mandates. Now, I've been getting kicked off of YouTube, and I'm going to try and drop YouTube right now. So if you're on YouTube, guys, jump on over to Rumble and follow to Veterans for Freedom there. I haven't been doing any of this stuff enough, but it looks like we're going to have to start adopting these tactics, just like everybody else, in order to keep this fight going. So I'm going to try and bid with farewell to my YouTube channel at this moment, and we're just going to stay on Facebook and Rumble.